I have your attention, please? We'll be starting up shortly. Good evening, and welcome to the Lowell Planning Board meeting for October 1st, 2012. Tonight, the first matter, we have a public hearing, which is a definitive subdivision plan approval for 206/208 Trotting Park Road. The Lowell Planning Board will hear a public hearing regarding the applicant by Alice Draper for approval of definitive subdivision plan of 86,227 square feet of property located amongst two existing lots at 206 Trotting Park Road and 208 Trotting Park Road. The project proposes to create an additional single-family building lot with 11,085 square feet of land. The existing lot to be reconfigured to accommodate the new lot on 206 Trotting Park Road, reduced to 33,094 square feet, and 208 Trotting Park Road reduced to 27,045 square feet of land. The proposal includes a new private way to access all three lots from Trotting Park Road, measuring approximately 280 feet in length and 20 feet in width. The site is located in a suburban single-family zoning district. This matter had been before us a couple of times, and I believe 2 meetings ago, they requested us to continue it. They're still working out with the engineer. It was also brought to our attention 2 meetings ago that since they were going to have to, I believe, look for a special permit on one of the roadways. We did receive a letter in the packet indicating that from the applicant. This is from Alice Draper. They're members of the planning board. I'm requesting a postponement of my scheduled meeting before the planning board from October 1st to a meeting scheduled for November 5th. This is regarding the proposed subdivision on 208 Trotting Park Road. There are items which need to be clarified for the city engineer's office, and this extra time is needed to clear up all items in order to be able to get a final approval on this project. I appreciate your time and thank you for consideration on this matter. And signed, Alice Draper, 208 Trotting Park Road, Lowell, Mass. I did have a chance today to speak to Alan Clausen from Planning and Development. He indicated that they do have some of the plans in. They don't have all of them. They were still looking for a couple of more matters. He also indicated that the applicant was looking to give us a copy of the proposed, I believe it was the ownership of the
Homeowners Association.
The Homeowners Association, that's right, thank you. So he said they were working on that, and they were going to try to give us a draft of that as well, too. I indicated to Aaron that if they received the draft prior to the meeting, if he could indicate that, asked if the city solicitor could look at it, and if he has any questions, tell him that was referred to him by myself, and hopefully if they have a chance to look at it, could give us some initial ideas on how they feel in the matter, because I know usually we do always refer that to them because it's a legal binding document. So hopefully they'll have that intact as well as the extra plans that they're working on. So we do have a letter from the applicant. Is anybody here this evening who likes to speak on this project one way or another? Hearing none. What's the request of the board? They're requesting a continuance to 11/5 to have more materials available.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to postpone the 206 to 208 Trotting Park Road project to request a date of November 5th, 2012.
You have a motion made
Second?
and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes yes. Any opposition? Hearing none, that motion is approved. Moving along on the agenda, we do have the annual meeting election of officers. This was scheduled for our last meeting, but we continued it to tonight's meeting. So we'd have a full board members here, also due to the fact of the lengthy meeting last meeting. So we have positions to be elected, including chairperson, vice chair, second chair, representative from NIMCOG, representative to the Historic Board, and preservation to the Green Building Commission. So at this point in time, what's the request of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'll nominate Mr. Thomas Linehan for another term as chairman of the planning board.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion is approved. So we have vice chair. Anybody interested in that? I know that's what Joe usually had, and I know Rich has been second vice chair in the past. You want to be vice chair?
Yeah,
Anybody else?
I would be interested in doing that, sure.
Anybody else interested in that
Whatever works,
position?
you know?
If not, I'll make a motion that we nominate Mr. Lockhart to vice chairperson.
Second that, Mr. Chairman.
Motion's made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion carried. Second vice chair. Anybody interested in that position? Mr.
Chairman,
Fischel?
I know that Mr.
Joe.
Boyle expressed to me that he'd be interested in the Green Building Commission
Okay,
representative, so in the spirit of having everybody contribute, I'd be willing to take on that role if he saw fit.
Based on that, Mr. Chairman, I'd recommend Mr. Gendron for second vice chair.
I'll second the motion.
motion's made and second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposition? Hearing none, that motion passes. Representative to Northern Middlesex Council of Government.
Mr. Chairman, I'm the existing representative, and I'm the assistant treasurer, and I serve on the finance committee and the personnel committee, and I've been extremely active, so I'd like to continue that ongoing.
I'll make a motion that Gerald Frechette continue as representative to NIMCOG.
I'll second that.
Motion's made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes yes. Any opposition? None, that motion carries. We have the representative to the Historic Board. I know, Rich, you've been on there for quite some period of
Yes, I'm
time.
currently chair and enjoy it a lot, and I would like to continue in that role.
Mr. Chairman, I'll nominate Mr. Lockhart as our representative on the Historic Board.
A second?
Motion made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes yes. Any opposition? Hearing none, that motion carries. And the last one is Representative Green Building Commission.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Mr. Joseph Boyle as our representative on the Green Building Commission.
I'll second the motion.
Motion's made in second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Chair votes yes. Any opposition? Hearing none. The motion carries. Did you get those, Joe? All
Yep,
in
I think I got them all.
Okay, got ya.
Good.
All right, we have some notices from abutting towns, and I don't believe we have much to speak of in our package on that. So moving along, we do have zoning board of appeal notices. I believe we have two. Anybody have any comments on them? One of it is for a, let's see what we got. I think there's two in nature. Let me see if we have the,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I had spoken to you informally at the last meeting on this subject of ZBA notices. And I would be very interested in having a conversation with the board on reviewing and recommending ZBA applications more generally. I would ask if we could have that discussion prior to actually considering these particular applications.
Sure. I mean, I have no problem with that. I did, just a way of background, I did speak with Aaron today. I indicated to him the conversation that you and I had last week. I believe you want to also get a little more information on special permits?
It isn't actually about more information. It's more general than that. It's a discussion about what we do and what our purpose is in reviewing ZBA applications. It seems to me that what the planning board is doing and has traditionally done is look at the applications and consider them almost as if we were putting ourselves in the place of the ZBA and making a ruling on the merits of the application, and then letting the ZBA know how we would have voted if this was an application before us. But we're doing this without benefit of the public hearing, without benefit of whatever additional information the applicant brings in, without benefit of the information that abutters bring in. We're really replicating the work of the ZBA, but in a less effective and less complete way, and then sending them a recommendation, once again, replicating their work, which they look at and realize that they made this recommendation without the benefit of the public hearing and all of this additional information. And I question just what value that really has for the zoning board, what value that has for the city and for the general permit review process. This is both about special permits and variances. At this point, I'd like to ask, does anybody on the board feel that I'm mischaracterizing the process or its value?
Well, for the longest period of time, what we used to do we would take each individual one and we'd discuss it on its merit. And then, not too long ago, maybe within the last year or so, one of the board members at the time, Attorney Joseph Claremont, indicated that, under the rules and regulations, he believes under Chapter 40, I believe it was, that we don't really have to go in detail on each one of them, and what we come down to is if anybody has any particular comments on those matters, we'd pass them along. If no one had any particular matters on those, then a lot of times we wouldn't take them on an individual basis. But the way our procedure's written up is that we do have to just make a recommendation if we have comments for them. Joe, if you want to expand on that a little further, I know we went from going in detail to each individual until before then we just took them up as general, and anybody have any comments on that? If we did, we made a comment. If not, then we shipped them over.
Yeah, that's a pretty good synopsis of the history of ZBA notices, I guess, in front of the board. It's pretty much just that. If the board is in their review of the application, Mr. Boyle makes a good point that you might not be getting the most up-to-date information from an applicant, or if an abutter is presenting any kind of additional information. But based on what we do have, and staff could, I guess if you were looking for more information or some general comments about it based on a staff review, we could provide that to the board, if that would be more helpful in the review of ZBA notices. That could be something that staff could provide.
Sometimes we do get staff review on certain matters that they feel of a particular interest, especially if it's I don't want to say a bigger sized property, but one that has come to your attention more. Sometimes you have given us a detailed analysis, and usually what we've had in the past is a lot of them come for special permits for signs, and a lot of time we have a person who's what we call it the design
Yeah, our
You?
DPD design planner.
design planner. So a lot of times we would go along with their recommendation. At times, we did have their recommendation up to date before our meeting, and sometimes we didn't. So a lot of times, we'd go along with the design plan in regards to those matters, especially like when they're non-conforming, if they were conforming. Like one of them would come back would be much, much higher than what's in the neighborhood, too big, too oversized. And to talk about the lighting, what type of lighting it was, and all the natures of that matter. So some of them come in that way. So I don't know if any other boards want to chime in on some of that discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Chairman?
so I think your characterization is pretty good, Joe. It's questionable what value it is for us to make a recommendation to the zoning board on these issues, but I do think we made a significant change in the way we address them somewhat recently. I think it was Mr. Claremont, actually, who raised a similar point a few months ago,
Yeah.
saying previously we went through every single one. We made a recommendation one way or the other, and sometimes we said we don't have enough information. But it was Mr. Claremont who said, maybe it's better that we don't take them individually and only call out ones that have a particularly significant issue from more of a planning perspective. I think you're saying a similar thing here. So I think we have in recent months sort of changed our the way we address these zoning board issues. It is a good point. I don't think it makes sense for us to go through each one individually, but what we've done, I think, is if one of us highlights a particular project that we think is either problematic or not from more of a planning perspective, then we call it out and we make that known to the zoning board, and they can use that as they see fit.
My issue here, what I'm bringing up, goes to the term you just used, from a planning perspective. There was the term used before, a significant issue. For example, in a sign application, if a sign was, the board thought that a sign was too big for a neighborhood and was inappropriate there. If there is an issue of such significance, I do not feel that it's going to slip by the zoning board without their noticing it. I don't think that, in particular these neighborhood impact things, is there enough parking? Was there generally enough parking in the neighborhood? Would this building fit into the neighborhood? That's really their bread and butter. That's really what they do, what they focus on. And I question whether that type of issue are weighing in on those, again, without the same level of information that they have, really provides them with any useful any useful guidance or information that they wouldn't already be aware of and know on their own. What I was thinking about when I raised this issue was the topic of from a planning perspective. What types of recommendations, what types of ideas can this board provide to the ZBA on applications that aren't the ZBA's own bread and butter? And what I was thinking of in terms of is conformity to accepted public plans. We are, in a sense, as the planning board, the keeper of the plans. There's the city's comprehensive plan, there are various neighborhood plans, urban renewal plans, and whatnot. And it's really our responsibility as a board to judge things, to make our decisions taking into account those plans. And I feel that that is an area we could focus on in our recommendations that would provide useful guidance to the ZBA. And that telling them what they already know in terms of this neighborhood has parking issues, what they already know probably better than us because they have the neighborhood showing up. This sign wouldn't fit into the neighborhood. The turning radius into this parking space is too tight. Excuse me. On one recent application, one member of the board brought up a question of whether the hardship on a variance application was a legitimate hardship. That's really what the ZBA does for a living, so to speak. And I don't see our recommendations on those topics as really providing the ZBA with any real benefit. And if they're just getting and if they're just seeing planning board recommendations as being like that, either telling them things they already know or offering an opinion based on information that isn't as good as theirs, they're going to tend to overlook them, not view them as something that's particularly important for them to pay a great deal of attention to. And they'd probably be right to do so. Whereas if we were sending them recommendations which really focused on conformance to official city plans and the guidance and policies and visions therein, I feel that that would really be providing something of value in the permitting process and would be looked upon as such by the board, by the zoning board.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, to that point, and I can appreciate what Mr. Boyle is saying, would it be appropriate if we reached out to the Zoning Board of Appeals and just asked what they would find as helpful recommendation or useful recommendations coming out of this board? Something that they would find would help, assist them in their deliberation. I mean, I think, we're surmising what we think would be helpful for them, and you raise an interesting point. But I think if we could reach out, even through Joe, and just say, we're reevaluating what comes out of recommendations or from the planning board relative to ZBA notices, and what would they find extremely helpful as they deliberate over some of these issues. I don't know if that, what my colleagues think about that. But.
Yeah, I like that idea, Jerry. I think that would be, identify the value that we do contribute. I've often thought the same thing, Joe, about what value do we really add here to the whole process. And, I've questioned a lot over a period of time, too. I think, our expertise is really in a site plan review process in detail. I think as a board, we do a very good job doing that. And there's a lot of these things that come through that, we don't have enough information, we don't have prints, we don't have good information to make a judgment. And perhaps if we could take a look at those more closely as they come through, and we might even be provided with testimony and more detailed information, that what we could pass on to them is comments relative to, the site plans that would be, where they're not as experience with such things, I think, that.
The comment I have on that is twofold. One is they have planning staff at the ZBA meetings as well as we do, and they're all interchangeable. They take turns going to each one of them. So same as when we get comments in our packet from Division of Planning and Development, they get the same on their agenda. I know if we look at the overall, planning aspect of it, if they're coming in for a variance to begin with, they don't have to look at the neighborhood. It doesn't matter. They have to meet the criteria of the variance.
Yeah.
Majority of their things are variances, which, so it really wouldn't matter when we look at the neighborhood character and that stuff, that doesn't come into play. Years ago, and I'm going back 15, 20 years now, we had every applicant come in here and take their case in front of us. Our meetings doubled in length. We averaged 4+ hours an evening. Then we found out that really our feedback was minimal at best from the ZBA. And they even told us that. They said, I don't know why you're looking through all of it, but that's up to you guys. And then as we gone on, basically they just came with a recommendation. We looked and said, the only reason why we're doing them is because of the requirement under our zoning. Now, if we have a matter that needs a site plan approval, and then they go to them for a special permit because they need a reduction in parking, or if they need a reduction in side yard, or something like that, or they need a special permit. Any conditions that we put on our site plan carry over to the ZBA meeting. And no matter what recommendations they have to concur with our site plan approval. So the bigger projects, where it does interfere with the neighborhood, when they come in for a bigger project, they have to come before us first. We have our complete public hearing. Perfect example was Lowe's. We put, my memory serves me correctly, it was the most conditions we put on any project. And my tenure and prior to that, I think we ended up with, it varied from 32 to 36 conditions. Then when it went to the ZBA, anything they put on, they put additional conditions on it, but they had to encompass our conditions as well. So I think for the bigger projects that we have the benefit for the public hearing, absolutely, that's where we zone in on. But if it's a variance, they tell you, land is unique, this is your requirement. When we started our educational training, they totally got what their responsibility is and what ours is. And they kind of like said, we're gonna take care of the variances, and, basically those aren't up for us. And they got that. They know that we're gonna vote on them the way we see fit after a public hearing. And they know that we get the limited information. So once in a while, they might say, well, the planning board recommended this, but they didn't have the benefit of the public hearing we have. So, the question is, do we go through them in detail? I think they get the staff recommendations that we get, so I think it's being looked at in-house as well as the recommendations we got, and I'm very satisfied with the recommendations we have. So I think if it comes down to, like I said, if it's a sign thing, if we see something we think is too big, someone picks it out of character, mentions it. If it's just a variance, we've been told time and time again, like a couple of meetings ago, because I'm retiring and I want the financial needs. It's not a criteria. It's very clear because land's unique, and it talks about the variances, and even some of the board members from the ZBA with the training with us, they were surprised at some of the things they should be more focusing on. So it's just a requirement by our zoning that it comes before us for recommendation, what they do with it, what they will do with it. But, so that's why we've, over the years, have narrowed the scope of our regulations on these by making a recommendation due to the fact where we had all the people come down here. So our meetings lasted, we did the whole ZBA meeting plus our planning board meeting, all on the same night. So, that was, so we could get a good recommendation on them.
Yeah.
So then people are saying, and the board voted enough was enough, just have them send it to us, we'll pick up on it. Then we decided, let's do each one in detail, make our comments on it. If we have any questions, in planning development will give us comments. And then we got to the point where, let's just pick out the ones that concern us and make the recommendations over to them. Because I think theirs is more limited in scope than ours is. So, and therefore, if, as Steve well said, if we go through it and Steve picks out one that's of particular interest to him, he'll mention to him. If Jerry picks out one, then we discuss it all in detail. So we still make recommendations, but not as in depth. And I know we've never had any major feedback from the ZBA, with the last 3 chairmen that I've talked to, when I see them in the streets and talk to them about matters, then, they say how they have the benefit of DPD staff and also the public hearings, and they know it's just basically it's a formality what we send to them. So, That's why we've kind of relaxed a little bit more of our procedure to get involved in the recommendations, but we still, if we see one that is a flag to one of us upon reviewing them, I mean, I can honestly tell you that a lot of board members spend a lot of time visiting these sites. You know, there's no doubt about it, and then you get to the point, we recommend something, and then, you know, what they do with it, but I mean, I think when it comes into where we have a hearing on it, that's where we get into land use regulations a lot better than the ZBA does, and they understand what our requirements are compared to theirs. So I don't know how far we want to go on them. I mean, it doesn't matter to me, you know, if you want to just pick them out, or if you want staff to reach out to ZBA and say, you know, planning board was curious, you know, in their recommendations, is there anything particular you want them to look over? They say yeah, if they say no, fine as well, then, I mean, it's for their assistance. I mean,
I think that would be worthwhile,
you know,
too.
I mean,
That makes sense.
I mean, then we know what they're looking for, you know, might answer the question, you know.
It is for their assistance. I think it would be very useful to hear from them what we can do to assist them.
Sure, I have no problem. I mean, I think it's a good idea, yeah.
I think, you know, maybe we shouldn't be getting all these things either. Some of them are so,
But I think it's a criteria that we have to get them, so I mean. but I
well,
mean,
yeah, okay.
I have a question. Is it a criteria? I mean, is it, maybe Joe, can you
Part of it.
enlighten us? Is it part of our code that zoning ZBA matters have to come before the planning board for recommendation?
All of them?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's in the code or if it might be in planning board bylaws or such.
Yeah.
I think it might be bylaws,
Mhm.
But if
It'd be
the,
good to look into that. Maybe that needs to be adjusted. Personally, I like to know.
Yeah,
I like to,
it's nice to know.
like to get the items, and
It is.
like you said, Tom, I go through them, and if there's one pops out at me as, that's, you know, either good or bad, I'll go by the site and I'll check it out, and sometimes I'll make a comment at the meeting regarding it. So I like getting the information. But whether or not it makes sense for us to talk about it and comment on it at this meeting, if the zoning board doesn't pay much attention to our recommendation anyway, then, yeah, it could be a waste of time. But I like the idea of asking them.
Sure, I mean, any type of feedback would be positive, you know? But I don't think it's in our bylaws. I think it's in the zoning code regulations. Because our bylaws are pretty minimal. Matter of fact, I was reading them today, and they're pretty simple. I mean, they talked about election of officers, how many board members we can have. That bylaw says 5 to 9, you know, appointed for 5 years, consecutive terms till you run out again. Recommendations, each people has 1 vote, how many times we meet, and that's basically it. It's less than 2 pages long. You know, that was basically it. I mean, so I don't think it's in the planning board bylaws itself. It might be somewhere in the zoning regs, the recommendation. But I mean, so we can follow up and get that question answered,
Get
and
that
then find out what the
information.
ZBA, you know, would like us to focus in on. I don't think we have to make particularly a motion if I'm making a recommendation to the ZBA or request for staff to look into those matters. But if you need it in the form of a motion, we could do so, so. I think it's just a request.
Yeah, I think that'd be
Yeah, I mean,
fine.
it's not a project in front of us where we have to vote on it.
right.
Okay. So those would be helpful. 2, what criteria that we have to look at, and 2, what criteria would the ZBA look at for helping them out? As I said, like, you know, except for the big projects where then they get all that stuff in detail. Any further discussion on that?
I just think that, yes, one more minor point. This question of what criteria should this board be looking at as we make our recommendations? I think that's something that the members of this board should think about as well, and be ready to talk about with whatever members of the ZBA we might have at our meeting, or go to their meeting, or, you know, have a discussion with them. For example, one of the findings, one of the considerations in the issuance of a variance is consistency with the intent of the zoning. Not the letter of the law in the zoning, the intent of the zoning. And the intent of the zoning is ideally determined by what was in the comprehensive plan. The zoning code and map were drawn up for the purpose of advancing the goals that were in the comprehensive plan. And so that would seem like a field, you know, intent, the purpose of the zoning, that would be very much in this, an appropriate thing for this board to consider. That's,
I think basically, I think for the variances, like, the 3 criteria, I believe, is what we learned at training.
Yeah, I believe that's for special permits, but we've got all the material on that,
Yeah,
but I don't
that
believe that's the
basically does it.
criteria.
So, I mean, when I make a recommendation on a variance, I pull out what the variance, you know, that topology, the slope of the land is one of them? Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, and then, you know, and because what ZBA was told, basically, it's very, very hard to get a variance legally. Without people, you know, people don't always challenge them, but to meet the criteria of a special, of a variance is difficult. So, I mean, usually, and I know we have the criteria, I don't have it with me this evening, but breaks down 3 or 4 different criteria. We actually have it on the chat map. I look at those 3 or 4. If they meet those, you say fine. If they don't meet those, then you make recommendations. So I think our recommendation is solely on what they're asking for. I mean, if it's a special permit, you know, we look at that. If you look at the variance, then you look at the criteria outlined in the 2 of them. And even in our zoning book, it tells us what the special permit process is before the ZBA. So I think we have to limit ourselves to what they're looking for when we make a recommendation. So if they say you're looking for a variance, you look at the criteria what a variance needs. If they need a special permit, look at the criteria what the special permit needs. And then do we have enough information in our packet to make a determination on that by reviewing the papers in front of us? And a lot of times we can now, and said, not enough information. I mean, more times than not, I know myself, Mr. Chairman said, really up to the neighbor who's getting pushed upon next to them. If they're on board with it, they give up a little land, are they convenient with it, are the neighbors happy with it? You know, sometimes, you know, one guy, and that person's not in front of us, and they come in, the neighbor says, yeah, we don't mind if they go 5 feet this way, you know, we're all on board about it. It's been that way. I mean, we've seen ones before where, I think it was off Woburn Street, where they already had the pool, remember, in there, that built up and had the deck, and they were cutting trees, and it was pushing into the other land. All the neighbors come in and said, fine, but the deck was so high. It's one of those back streets right there behind the mobile station right there on Woburn Street. Remember the site?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And it was,
Let's go back quite a
it
few
came
years.
all back in, and all the neighbors were like, yeah, we don't have much problem for it, except for the one abutter. I might have been looking for compensation, I'm not sure what the issues were, because we had some letters for and against it, but, so I think it comes down to, you know, what the request is, whether it's a special permit or variance, but, you know, so I think that's how I make a recommendation on what the criteria is, what they're asking for.
I would be interested to have planning staff take a look at the state zoning and our zoning and look at the requirements for special permits and for variances and offer their input into which of those are in our wheelhouse as a planning board. You know, these questions about shape of the land and the hardship, for instance. I feel that that's very much what the zoning board does for a living. Right. That whatever we'd have to offer for them, you know, we wouldn't really provide all that much value. Whereas, purpose and intent of the zoning would be something that we would be more in a position to. But I would like to hear, get something from planning staff about their thoughts on that.
Anything you want to comment on that now, Joe, or do you want to just?
I'm not putting you on the spot now. We're going to be revisiting this at some point, I assume.
Yeah, we could revisit, we could
Sure.
provide some information for the board, sure.
Okay, any further discussion? If not, we can, saying that, we'll look at the ZBA matters. Anybody have any questions on either one of these? If not, there's only 2, I'll just read them if need be then. We have, it looks like V. Ventura's LLC, the application is Sheila, and it's a special permit on Westford Street, 1075. I believe, is this the one matter that's gonna come before us in the future, that Aaron mentioned to us last meeting? The
Yes,
buildings there, but they need the parking next door?
yes, absolutely, yep, this is gonna be
This
coming
is
in
to
the
operate
future.
a new 3,000 square foot restaurant with reduction of parking requirement pursuant to section 6.1.5. Now, this is the one that we talked about, Jeff Boyd's garage. They built the building, but they don't have the parking.
Right, they're actually in front of the Conservation Commission as well. They had submitted a request for a determination of applicability, because they're proposing an expansion of the parking lot.
They have some, was it the water behind?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep. And-
I'm sorry, I think this is a different site. I think this
Is that the
is
same one?
over by the, because I did take a
I
look
wonder
at
if it was
this.
the
This
same
is
one.
over by
That
the
big building
Across from the old
down on
landfill.
Westwood.
the landfill.
Oh, that one, okay,
Yeah, this is
okay.
over by the
Okay,
landfill.
'cause that one I was curious if that was
This
coming
was
before.
the, this was a big project before the planning board.
All right, that I do recall now. Okay, that is a different one, all right.
Yeah.
So that's why I was curious if it's the same one.
Yeah,
Okay, so this is a different one, okay.
yeah.
Okay. So the other one's coming before us, when, I thought Aaron said it's coming before us, I thought Westford Street didn't meet it. Okay. So this is for deduction of, oh, this is, okay, I get you. So behind that is the landfill. I mean, this one here is a question of whether they meet the criteria for the parking. The only thing that was, when you talked about, as per the mixed-use table on the previous page, how they added those numbers together, and how they said certain people won't be there certain times during the day, and some of them travel during the day, so we don't count their parking spaces.
Which is the thought process behind the shared parking ordinances in the zoning? That different uses can share the same parking because
Right.
they would be using them at different times. Now, whether or not their claims about that in this application hold water is another matter. The idea is not a bad one. Whether it's actually works in this situation, I don't feel that I can say one way or another, but that's something the applicant's gonna have to meet a high burden of proof.
When you count, during the time period, number 3D, HBSS has 30% sales field consulting staff, and that is either on-field, field sales calls or at client sites, and swing by the office very infrequently for short distances. So, and now they're saying this reduces their numbers because they're not there, but
Well,
they're still
that's
being
their
used,
opinion.
so how can you how do you take those 7-9 spaces out completely? I mean, this is just looking at their mixed-use table and how it would apply. And it can, easy to say that these people are in the field, but they don't stop by. But if you're a salesperson, a lot of time, as people know, they do stop, they go to the office first before they go out. They come by, so, we talked about is, so, I know we can do the requirement of the mixed use, which we see from time to time. But how they break the analysis down, I'm not too convinced. I mean, the people in the sales business aren't gonna stop in. Then they have a lab space. They talk about that reduces it by 3 more. Insurance space we rented out requires 3 in this time period, but has the same 3 partners as the restaurant. So at least 2 owner spaces are shared. I mean, what if their interests change between the insurance and the restaurant? So how do you double count those numbers? The chart's kind of confusing, I mean.
Well, I found it very confusing, the way it was presented.
Yeah.
And, they're taking if you looked at the sign out front, I drove around here, I'd never done that.
It's tough on the back, yeah.
There are 10 spaces for 10 different businesses there. Right now, there's 5. So what's the parking requirement for the total building when it's fully occupied? I mean, and you gotta make assumptions to be able to figure that. Isn't that what we're really trying to determine here? As opposed to just taking a snapshot of what it is right today? I mean, they're gonna try to rent this whole building, then what happens?
In a sense, yeah, that's what the parking reduction they're seeking is for, to essentially free up parking for later for additional spaces that are currently vacant.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Yeah,
I said, that's essentially what the parking reduction they're seeking is for, is to have parking available for space that is currently vacant. 'Cause right now, the parking
okay.
requirement for the restaurant is 1 per 50 square feet, which would take up a number of parking spaces currently on the site.
So is this the one that we approved before with the limited parking that they had? Right, yeah. And now they're coming back and asking for it to be reduced, right? Yeah, but that was the one, I know exactly what you mean. You go right back. Because at the time, they were saying they only had a couple of spaces and that's all they needed. Okay. So then we have a recommendation on this matter, or just? I'll make a motion to deny.
I'll second the motion.
Motion made to deny, and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
Aye. Nay.
Four in favor, one against. Moving along, next matter is James and Charlotte Quayle on 171 Lou Street to convert a deck into a three-season sunroom where an accessory structure would fall within the required setback from the main dwelling. They're looking for a variance on this matter. This, I believe, what they have is, I believe, they have the deck and they want to enclose it, so it meets a different criteria.
Mr. Chairman, I think that this one falls in the category of things that really require input from the neighborhood. I'd recommend we take no action on this matter.
Okay, recommendation, no action. Any further discussion on that matter? Or
That's a motion, I'll second that motion.
motion made and second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes yes. Any opposition? Okay, that motion carries. Yeah, it looks like, at least they have the deck there, so whether it's enclosing it.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it.
So I guess what that one is it looks like it's just too close to the pool, is what it looks like, not to the backyard, which,
Yeah, it needs to be, it says it needs to be 10 feet
from the pool, huh? Well, maybe they're gonna do a 4-foot slide, I don't know.
and enclosed,
From the deck to the pool.
Yeah, nice slide, I don't know.
enclosed structure must be 10,
4 feet,
over 10 feet.
you have
from
young
the
kids
pool.
there, you know they're gonna. I've seen that happen before, and it was further than 10 feet.
They're gonna die from
Criteria.
Okay, moving along, we have general correspondences. Jerry, I'll start with you. I know we discussed it earlier, that you have some information to share with the board.
Mr. Chairman, just let everybody know, the NEMCOG annual dinner is Wednesday, October 17th at 6 p.m. at the Radisson. And certainly, NEMCOG is Northern Middlesex Council of Governments, and they have a guest speaker. Rich, I don't know if you even have that, I don't know who the guest speaker is. Unfortunately, I didn't bring the...
Oh, it's Celeste, the lady who is the new park superintendent here in Lowell.
Yeah, that's correct. The
I
new
can't remember her
superintendent
last
of the
name.
national parks will be speaking. And it's at 6 p.m. at the Radisson. And there are, I believe, tickets available through NEMCOG as well.
Thank you. Any other board members have any correspondence in regards to the boards they're on?
I'll just make a comment. The fall issue of the Lowell Historic Board newsletter, Presents from the Past, is now available online if you visit the city's website and look at Historic Board. It's full of all kinds of really interesting information about historical structures here in Lowell.
Plus, we've been getting those sent to us, right? You guys have been emailing us, which is
I
great
believe
to
so,
get.
yeah.
Yeah.
I believe they've
You know,
been coming
you don't
via
think to go
email.
look it on it, but when you get it, you have a chance to,
It is
You know, take a
interesting.
peek
Kim
at it.
Zanino does a really nice.
at least, you know, when we get it, you have a chance to look at it, where you don't always think to go look on the newsletter.
No.
So if we could continue having that sent to us, we'd appreciate it. Okay. Any other updates or any correspondence from any board members? Anything from the Division of Planning and Development? Any updates for the board?
Nothing really at this time, no.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, I had one request I wanted to make of staff.
sure.
It seems we have a city engineer who is very excited about the use of this porous pavement, this semi-permeable pavement, in order to reduce storm runoff. I think it's a very exciting technology, and its application is very positive for the city. But I really don't feel that I know a great deal about this subject. And if we are, as a board, requiring less in terms of stormwater infrastructure because we are relying on this semi-permeable pavement to deal with some of the problem, it's very important to make sure that that pavement is going to remain operational as intended. I feel that we should be making a habit in projects that include that, of including conditions for its maintenance and usage and whatnot, in order to maintain that it continues to do its job. And I don't think that, I certainly don't, I'm not perhaps there are other members of the board who do, but I don't feel like I know enough to know what those conditions should be. And so I would be very interested in seeing something either from planning staff or from engineering itself, perhaps a set of model conditions for that we should, that we could put into our decision in part, in whole, or in some version thereof, just to show us the type of things we should be thinking about and the types of conditions that would be appropriate for us to put in when such a project comes before the board.
Yeah, I think it would be very informational, to let us know what the stuff does.
Good idea.
I know when it was brought up at the last meeting on Rock Street, indicated we can't require them to do that because it's not in their conditions, but if someone wants to put it as an alternative, and the city engineer thinks it's a good idea, it would be nice for us to know what it's about, so we can make an intelligent decision.
When
I
some-
actually, I'll see if I still have a
It
binder.
could have a lot of benefit.
I actually had a binder that the planning board in the town of Pelham had a professor from UNH make a presentation on a development that was presented, 55 and older development in Pelham, and it was the first time that technology being introduced to the town, and I'll see if I still have the binder as well. It was actually pretty good. But it was, again, it was a professor at UNH that made the presentation to the board relative to educating the board about that material. So I'm gonna see if I get the binder, as well as DPD, but I'll see if I have the binder. It was helpful for me to understand, and I was on the lending side of this, trying to understand the project. So I'm gonna see if I can find material on that I have as well.
I think the big important thing would be what the upkeep is, you know, if your people allow it,
Yeah, things like that. What's,
then, you know-
what's the maintenance requirement?
and where is it gonna be? And what, you know, and you
Maintenance.
can pretty much,
And
you know,
who
like,
should do it and stuff.
when we talked about the Rock Street one, like, where the finances to maintain it, who's gonna maintain it, if it's in a different, maybe area in the city where they have the financial means to maintain it, then it might fit there better, you know?
Yeah,
Also conditions along the lines of what can be used during winter. No sand shall be applied, but is it okay to use rock salt? No, rock salt's water soluble? I really don't know the answer to that.
You know, the question is, you know, like the one on Rock Street, you get that, you work it up, you develop it, you put it there, people come in, people go, if it gets icy, they go to Home Depot buying their salt and rock salt.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not gonna read, this is what you put down there, I mean.
And to be honest
I mean,
with
what's the
you,
average person, go get the salt,
they're gonna be safe
you
first.
know, because I don't want to slip and fall, I mean,
All right.
I mean, it's not something you put in the deed, say, oh, you can't do that on your driveway, you know?
and to be honest with you, the first generation family that gets in there, that's involved possibly in this process, understands that, but then when it's sold and resold, that's what happens with conservation.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen projects where they had extensive conditions put on it, but, you know, the third person that buys the house, you know what, they're not following that at all, they're not in tune with that at all, you know, which is,
And now, if you're talking about a single-family home versus a large project, which is going to have a professional management,
Right.
which will, and a condo association, which will presumably have some continuity, you know,
An
such
agreement,
conditions might work better.
Yeah, like an agreement of maintenance, so you know what's gonna be done.
Right.
Instead of just, you know, people say, well, it's low maintenance, but it's still maintenance, you know, and who's gonna take the responsibility, right?
Yep.
Instead, you put the money up front, you do it all nicely, and then a few years from now, it's gone.
So what would the engineering department like to see us
They
putting
give
in
us
these?
some type of report on it, you know, what the pros and cons are, whatever, what they recommend or how they don't, or even if staff has anything in hand.
Yeah, we could coordinate with the engineering department to provide something to the board. Sure, absolutely.
Some-
That
some,
would be interesting to see.
Model conditions, perhaps?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Any further discussion? If not, we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
so moved?
Second?
Motion made second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes yes. We adjourn. Good night, thank you, everyone. Hopefully traffic.